Good afternoon and welcome again to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I am Mo Wright, President of Raymond Consulting, and proud to be chair of the CMC Board of Trustees. Today, our forum is Columbus Issue 1, Ward Off or Ward On. It's part of our political series sponsored by Hannah News Service and the Ohio Farm Bureau Federation, represented today by many of their associates. Let's thank both of them for their support today. And a little change today, questions today will be submitted in writing. You will find a piece of paper in your forum flyer. We ask that you include your name and the question, and a member of the CMC Program Committee will begin to collect these about midway through the discussion. The best questions will be selected for content and relevance and read aloud by our Program Committee volunteers during the Q&A portion later in the program. Now let me introduce you to our speakers for today. Speaking on behalf of Issue 1, the co-chairs of Represent Columbus, Jonathan Beard and Whitney Smith. Let's welcome them. And speaking against Issue 1, Bryan Clark and James Ragland. Walker Evans, co-founder and publisher of Columbus Underground, will be our moderator. We ask that each of the panelists defer to Walker's directions as the conversation proceeds. We're going to have a very civic dialogue today, and I'm sure an engaging one. If necessary, the microphones will be turned off in order to move the conversation along. Walker, the podium is yours. Let's welcome our speakers for today.
How's everybody today? Cool. Got all my notes here on paper so that my phone can be free for catching Pokemon. So, just letting you know. Columbus voters will decide during a special election on August 2nd, which is next week, if they want to change Columbus City Council from an at-large format to a hybrid system that includes 3 at-large seats and an additional 10 ward-based seats at first, which would then continue to grow as the city's population continues to increase. Those in favor of wards have generally argued that the new format would provide better representation to individual neighborhoods. Those against wards have generally argued that the current system works just fine and that the specific ward proposal contains flaws. Of course, in a few minutes, we'll be hearing a lot of additional arguments and details from both sides. Before we get started, I wanted to just give 2 quick thank yous. One to Lauren Sega, who is our politics and civics writer at Columbus Underground. She helped prepare some of the questions today and has been covering this issue all summer long. I also want to give a quick thanks to Tim Fulton, who we've collaborated with on the Confluence Cast, a new weekly audio podcast we just launched on Monday. Anyone in here can subscribe to that on iTunes and listen to that. It's going to cover a lot of great local information. I mentioned it specifically because the debut episode that just came out this week is all about Issue 1, and it's a great supplemental listen to what you're going to hear today. Plus how appropriate that it's called the Confluence Cast, and here we are at the confluence of our 2 rivers. It's fate that we called it that. So to get started, each group is going to have 60 seconds to give some opening remarks. We flipped a coin and decided that one Columbus will be up first. Is that correct? No, other way around. Sorry. So Represent Columbus will be going first. So.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for the CMC. My name is John Beard. I'm co-chair of Represent Columbus, along with Whitney Smith to my right. Got a minute to summarize 20 years of activity and how we got here. For the last 20 years, I've run the Columbus Compact Corporation, which has done the largest community economic development initiative in a generation. And through that period of time, we started working on East Main Street, which had a lot of problems at the time. There were, public drunkenness, urination, open-air drug markets. And in 2010, there came to be a bunch of shootings, a rash of shootings on the street, which we documented with a set of security cameras we had purchased. We took this information to City Council and other stakeholders. Every stakeholder worked with us. We needed one specific change in legislation from City Council, which they would not provide, ignored us. 22 neighborhood groups ended up signing a letter to City Council asking for help on this important issue. These are area commissions, civic associations, block watches, and business associations. We were again ignored. A young man was fatally shot on the street. One of the bullets ended up in the front door of a house I had just rehabbed. And, as I kept wondering, on this issue of life and death, how can council not listen to us? And came to the conclusion that we need to change the city council. Thank you.
Thanks. And one of you guys from One Columbus?
Well, good afternoon. My name is James Ragland. I'm here representing One Columbus. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mr. Wright, and the sponsors for today's opportunity to educate more about why we feel Issue 1 is wrong for the City of Columbus. We're here to discuss the details of this ballot initiative, and as we do so, I'd like for you to consider three things. Ask yourself, why is this ballot initiative on in August in advance of the largest election in the history of the United States coming in November? Number two, why are there no maps if we're dealing with ward representation that the voters can view and determine whether or not they like the issue moving forward? And then number three, what is the budget and who fits the bill? The problem that we have with Issue 1 primarily is we would have to take from police and fire, from social services agencies, and other things to give to more politicians. Today, we're going to talk about all of those issues, the needs that we have in Columbus, and whether or not ward representation will fill those needs. We believe that it doesn't, and so we're going to ask you to vote no. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thanks. John, I'd like to start with you, and this kind of goes a little bit in line with what you were just talking about a second ago. You've worked on previous efforts on this exact issue in the past. There was a really strong push in 2012. Why did this year's initiative make it all the way through to the ballots, and why is 2016 the right time for wards in Columbus?
Yeah, so the city charter can be amended in two ways, or you can initiate an amendment in two ways. One is that 5 council members can vote to put something on the ballot, and then we vote on it. Or the second is that ordinary citizens can collect 10% of the signatures of the electorate, and then that forces a ballot issue. We started this in 2011 and submitted signatures in the summer of 2012, submitted over 30,000 petition signatures. Did not have enough valid signatures to qualify for the ballot. That means the signator is both a Columbus elector and signs at the address they're registered to vote at. 2014, we went through the Charter Review Commission process and presented testimony and asked for the Charter Review to consider this, the only thing that had received that many signatures to put it on the ballot, along with the mandatory pay increases for council. They did not do that. 2015, we tried again, submitted in July 2015 to try to get on the November ballot. Again, we came up short with the petition signatures, and we were running as a grassroots effort at that time. This time, we professionalized the effort and put a lot more into the upfront validation of signatures. We submitted 39,308 petition signatures of Columbus electors qualified for the ballot. And under the Ohio Constitution and the city charter, it's required that once petitions are validated, it's 120 days to the ballot. So we're on the August 2nd special election date because that is a special election that was calendared for this year. And that's why Minerva Park also has a ballot issue.
Great, thanks. Do either of you like to respond to anything John just said?
Yeah, I'd like to point out that the special election was triggered by the date that the petitioners chose to file with the city. And they could have chosen to file for the November election and given far more Columbus voters the opportunity to weigh in on this. Instead, they chose a special election that will cost Columbus taxpayers $1.2 million. That's $1.2 million we didn't have to spend to put this before electors.
All right, thanks. We'll come back to that in a second. James, some of the opponents of the council ward systems have said that it could lead to, proponents of the ward systems have said that it could lead to more infighting among council members. My question is, would that necessarily be a bad thing if people have more debates and discussion, during council meetings and as a part of the democratic process?
When you mention infighting, I have a tendency to look at what has happened with the infighting at the City Council of Detroit. I don't think that anything in Columbus needs to resemble any type of municipal governance like Detroit does. If you look around the country, I think what the people are clamoring for is effectiveness. We're not looking for fights at City Hall. We're not looking for more publicity because you've got more people who are voting no against things. We're looking for more impact on our neighborhoods. We're looking for more effectiveness within our neighborhoods. I believe that we can get there with the current at-large structure of Columbus City Council. Just look at this out this window here. We've got a beautiful downtown. We've got a very vibrant Central Ohio area, but we know that there are neighborhoods that really need some more upkeep. And I believe that having an eye for both downtown as well as those neighborhoods is the best way to go about it. You don't want to just parcel things out for the sake of having an argument.
Oh, response?
Yes, I'd love to respond. Just when we talk about representation, and when we are going to hear a lot of numbers today, and the cost to put this on the ballot was because the City Council has been petitioned many, many times to put this on the ballot over the years. So we're not going to have that thrown in our lap. The City Council had many opportunities to put this on the ballot and repeatedly refused. So we are seeing that cost to taxpayers because of their inability to react to very concerned citizens, 39,000 concerned citizens in the city of Columbus demanding representation and change.
Whitney, let's stick with you for a second. I know this is a topic you've talked a little bit about before. Columbus has area commissions. While they don't have a vote at City Council, they do have the ability to establish neighborhood guidelines and vote on things like development in neighborhoods. Doesn't this current system already provide a way for people in neighborhoods to get involved in what's going on?
Yeah, I would love to talk about area commissions. So if anyone has recently been to a city council meeting, you will see a section that is marked for area commissions, and it's empty. And I've spoken to many people on area commissions and leader in the communities, and I said, why is that empty? And they said, well, city council doesn't listen to us. We don't have a voice, and many times they've never even walked in the neighborhood that I represent. So we've stopped coming to the meetings. So if you go, you'll see it's empty. Under our system, we strengthen area commissions. We strengthen community leaders. We give them a voice to actually have someone who walks in their neighborhood, who knows their issues, and who can speak up for them.
Any follow-up thoughts on area commissions?
Well, I'm not sure what city council meetings that Ms. Smith is attending, but when I attend Columbus City Council meetings, I do see commissioners. I do see members of the civic associations that are always there. Many of you are in this room today. I don't think that despairing against our area commissions and our civic associations is the proper way by which we need to be moving forward in a city with as bright a future as the city of Columbus. And this is really what I really want to hone in on. We're taking advantage here of the national anger and the local anger that may be righteous in many ways. However, is this ward representation going to be markedly better than what we currently have? We do not believe that it is, and I believe empowering our area commissions and our civic associations to do even more work within the communities is the best approach, and our mayor and our city council has proposed that with our Charter Review Commission.
Bryan, it's been pointed out a couple of times that Columbus is the largest or one of the largest cities without ward or district representation of some kind. If it works in Austin and Houston and Phoenix and San Francisco, why wouldn't it work here in Columbus?
You know, I'd love to talk about Columbus versus the other largest cities in the nation. Look at Chicago. Does anyone believe that Chicago has fixed its problem with crime? It hasn't, and it has a ward system. Look at Milwaukee, look at Memphis. Have they fixed their problems with unemployment, with low wages? They haven't, and they have a ward system. Look at Washington, D.C., the largest ward system of all. No one would say that our Congress is representative, is effective, or is efficient. Ward systems do not equal the changes that those behind Issue 1 wish that it would. And then look at Columbus, the fastest growing economy in the Midwest. The fastest growing wage growth in the nation, named America's Opportunity City, just won the Smart Cities Challenge. Our system is clearly working, and the ward systems in these other cities are not delivering the results that their citizens need.
Any thoughts on comparison cities?
Yeah, truth be told, we don't claim that ward systems solve all problems. I said last night, it's not going to kill the germs that may cause bad breath. It does what it does. This is for representation. This is better for representation for our neighborhoods. What you hear on the other side is a fear-mongering campaign where they throw out, what they consider to be the worst of America at you. James brought up Detroit. Detroit was an all-at-large city until 3 years ago. Okay, so they throw these things out, just not even knowing the facts on it. Just consider the fact that citizens of Columbus are the best judges of how we need to be represented, not necessarily people who are the establishment. They've got a very different measure of what they think success is than the people do, and the people are calling for change right now.
John, with you mentioned earlier this being a special ballot election, and with such a huge general presidential election coming up, actually let me rephrase that, a huge presidential election coming up. Yes, it's going to be huge. Why put this up for a ballot by itself in August instead of on the general election?
Again, we think this is actually good. I mean, it ends up being a function of the Constitution and the city charter, which require votes so that councils can't sit on things. First of all, we think, we're here right now, and we're not talking about a national election. We're talking about a local issue. So we've got a chance for Columbus voters to focus on this issue. It's not as if Columbus voters can't vote August 2nd. Okay? It's a calendar election. Everybody knows about it. Everybody can vote. There's no exclusivity. The people who are interested in this issue will get out and will vote for it. We also think a special election is an informed election, and it's an informed electorate. So these aren't going to be the every 4 years I'm going to vote for the president and whoever else is on the sample ballot. These will be people who have taken the time to think about these issues, to consider them, and to vote their conscience.
Follow up?
It's kind of interesting to see what people say in public and then what they say on outlets like social media. And if you look at social media and the discussion about this from the supporters of Issue 1, you'll find a very different story. This was a campaign tactic. They chose this election because, in their words, they wanted fewer voters at the polls. That was a campaign decision. It was not a decision for a more informed electorate. And if you ask me, if we're going to make a massive change to our local government, I'd much rather have more citizens weigh in than fewer.
James, we've heard a lot from One Columbus about some of the specific flaws with this specific legislation. Do you think that another form of legislation for wards or districts at City Council could work, or is it just an at-large system is the only way to go from here on out?
No, I think the important part with that is that the mayor and Columbus City Council have commissioned a charter review committee that asks the public to decide what they would like to see with their local government moving forward. This was cooked up by a few people in a back room somewhere, then forced out to the public. They went and deliberately tried to get a depressed voter turnout here in August. And what the mayor and council are articulating is the need for us to go out to communities, gather information coming from folks that sit on civic associations and in our area commissions and other residents to determine what our best form of government looks like moving forward. Is it at large? We're not sure. Is it a mixture of at large and wards? We're not sure. What would a map look like? What would you want a map to look like? We're not sure. But what we are sure of is that we want your participation and your input in it before we go to a vote. And that is the important part of what we need to be doing moving forward. You don't just want a handful of people getting a depressed voter turnout to decide what we need to change about the Columbus City Charter.
Of course.
Perfect, thank you. When we talk about political tactics, a special election is not a political tactic. But what is a political tactic is once you see that 39,000 citizens have put a issue on the ballot that they are passionate about, and then you see the mayor put together a commission saying that he's going to address this issue, that is a form of voter suppression, and that is a political tactic. Another political tactic is the city council taking it upon themselves to write the language that is going to be on the ballots in an unethical way that includes language that is not even in our charter ever. So it's a disservice to the voters, and that's another form of voter suppression. So when we talk about those things, that's really a very important fact to look at and to keep in mind.
Whitney, part of the ongoing narrative that we've been hearing from Representative Columbus is that there's three kind of main issues with City Council currently. One, that there's no neighborhood representation. The second being that the appointment process is either broken or abused. And third, that running city council races is highly expensive, limiting challengers' ability to effectively campaign. This legislation only addresses one of those issues and leaves the other two off. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Definitely. So there are many issues that we see with Columbus City Council. The appointment process is obviously one of them. However, according to law, our ballot initiative has to be a single issue, and we can only address one issue. So the first most pressing issue was the lack of representation. So right now on City Council, as I have mentioned before, most people, I'm sure all of you know, but a lot of people, when I go to talk to people in different communities, they only know a few of their city council members. They certainly can't name all 7, and most of them have never met any of them because they don't walk in their neighborhood, they don't live in their neighborhood, and they don't understand their needs. So the at-large system, just fundamentally, you cannot represent 800,000 people in the city of Columbus. It's not fair to the city council members to have that task, and it's also not fair to the people that are asking for a representative in their neighborhood to talk to and tell about whatever issue that they have that is very specific to their neighborhood. So that's why we started with that. And while we would like to conquer every issue, we are focused on that because that's, according to law, we can only fix one problem at a time.
Any follow-up comments?
You know, we've heard a lot about representation. It's one of the words that's not actually in the charter amendment or on the ballot. Here's what is on the ballot. It is the exact same appointment process that exists today. Even though Represent Columbus TV ads would have you believe otherwise, doesn't change under Issue 1. Talk about neighborhood representation. Under Issue 1, a neighborhood representation would be 85,000 people. To put that in context, that would be Clintonville, Beachwald, Old North Columbus, going over to North Linden, and perhaps as far south as Milo Grogan and Wyland Park. So if you live in Clintonville and your representative is in Wyland Park, let's say, do you consider that person to be living in your neighborhood? I'm not sure how many people would truly view that as the neighborhood representation that's being sold by the Issue 1 crowd.
Bryan, there's a prominent One Columbus campaign ad out right now that talks about how this proposal would triple the size of City Council to 25 council members. But the legislation says that we wouldn't have that number of ward seats until the city's population doubles to around 1.6 million. I kind of crunched the numbers, and at a 12% growth rate, we won't really see that population until around 2075-ish, give or take. Is this really a pressing issue for right now? Is this something people should be concerned about, or something we can afford when, down the road, or rework down the road?
We're being asked to vote on the entire program, so if you go to buy a car and someone says it's only going to cost you $1,000 next year, you don't stop there and say, sure, let me sign on the dotted line. You want to know what the full cost is. And the same thing is true of Issue 1. What's the full cost of Issue 1? And the full cost is up to 25-member council. That's something that people need to take into consideration when they go and vote on this. They also need to keep in mind that when we get to that 25-member council, they'll get to vote for 3 at-large and 1 ward. So out of 25 council members, you get to vote for 4. Now, it's bad enough when you only get to vote for 4 of 13. It's much worse when you can only vote for 4 of 25.
Response?
I kind of forgot where I'm going with this. Start with the most recent. We'll vote for 4 of 13 when this is approved. This is just like Congress. You don't vote for 435 congressmen and women. Most of us can't name 7 council members, maybe in this room, but most people can't name 7 council members, and they certainly can't name what committees they're on or what issues they pursue. So we're voting blind on our council members right now across the city. What was the first part of the question? I'm sorry.
Just whether or not that's a pressing issue right now to address, or
So
something to.
you talked about a 12% growth rate. Let's go to MORPC, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. They've got a projection of Columbus' population for 2050, which is 955,020 people. Under Issue 1, that's a 15-person council. So this is MORPC. We trust them for planning and projections for everything else, for infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, all that kind of thing. So somehow, I don't understand how their projection is not valid anymore. It's a 15-member council, no bigger than that, through the 2050 census, which is the apportionment through 2062. If you take that growth rate and move it forward, and I did this Y equals MX plus B. I have a daughter who graduated from high school, so I'm a couple years refreshed with this. It's 207 years before we hit a 1.65 million in population. 207 years. If you project the same growth rate that Morpsey is projecting now and straight line that out, solving for Y, well, what is X when Y is 1.65 million? It's 207 years from now. So this is not something that's a pressing need to discuss right now.
That'd be an awfully long car loan
That's right.
to be concerned with. James, when you were running for mayor last year, one of the things that you had said in an interview with Columbus Underground was that the main reason you were running was in hopes of having better neighborhood representation. Wouldn't wards at city council level help address that concern that you raised last year?
I would say issue one does not. I think the nuance there is when I was running for mayor and today, I was hearing from people in every single neighborhood about the effectiveness of the mayor's office and Columbus City Council. And what people want is not necessarily more politicians. What they want is more resources. Can we solve the problem of equity of resources within our neighborhoods in Columbus? And I think that is the central discussion of what we're having here. Does issue one mean that every single neighborhood in Columbus is going to look like the Short North? Absolutely not. Does issue one mean that every single neighborhood in Columbus is going to look like German Village? Absolutely not. Can we accomplish the goals that are needed in Linden and Franklinton and some of our other depressed communities under an at-large system? Absolutely, I believe that we can, and we're working towards doing that right now. What we don't want to do is take our foot off the gas. I wasn't running for mayor because Columbus was just this depressed town. I was running for mayor because Columbus is a great place to live. Not everybody is experiencing that growth, but I feel like we've got a program in place and momentum to make sure that we do that under this current system.
I just want to mention we have our audience Q&A questions coming up in about 5 minutes, so we're going to wrap up with just a couple last things. John, some of the opponents of the ward proposal have argued that it's rooted in the sort of power struggle by people who've attempted to gain a seat on council either through the appointment process or an election. As someone who applied for a council appointment as recently as last year, how do you address those concerns?
That's a silly concern. One of the things I did in my application, it was essentially a protest application. I knew they weren't going to select me. They select cronies and insiders. One of the things I said was, if selected, I will not stand for election in the coming year because I think that people deserve to be able to fill an open seat on council rather than to replace an incumbent who's going to run with the council president's money. It's kind of interesting listening to James talk about this being the wrong approach. When he was running for mayor, to be clear, at Corinthian Missionary Baptist Church, at a public forum, he said he supports a mixed system like this that has at-large and district representations. So when Bryan talks about 4 of 13 or whatever the case may be, that's something James has endorsed right now. He's getting paid to say something different now, and that's fine. But to be clear about that, there's nothing inherently flawed about this proposal.
I have just one kind of question, and this is going to be for both Bryan and Whitney. We surveyed the readers of Columbus Underground a couple of weeks ago about this issue, and even though it was an informal poll, our readers favored the implementation of wards by a decent margin. The most significant number that we got out of that survey, though, was that our sample size was just under 1% of our readership. We could not get people to fill out a 2-minute survey about this issue, which leads us to believe that either people don't plan on voting or they just don't really care that much about this issue. If that's true, if 99% of the public doesn't really feel that strongly, how does that voter apathy, affect your ability to lead an effective campaign? Bryan, do you want to start?
Yeah. I don't believe that Columbus voters are apathetic. Absolutely not. I think that they care passionately about the future of our city. But what I think they are apathetic about is issue one. They see that it does not solve any of the problems it claims to solve. They see that it creates more bureaucracy, more cost. It's simply not the right direction for the city of Columbus. So am I surprised that people don't want to take a 2-minute survey on something that doesn't work? No, I'm not.
Whitney, would love to hear your comments on the same question.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the people of Columbus do care about this issue. We had 39,000 people in the city of Columbus, who live in the city of Columbus actually, sign this petition to get this issue on the ballot. People do care about this issue. Neighborhoods care about this issue, and that's why it's on the ballots.
Great, thanks. We're going to go ahead and move over to the Q&A section. It is CMC's tradition to take audience questions. Today's questions were written in advance and selected by members of the Metropolitan Club Program Committee for appropriateness and balance. So let's proceed with the first question.
I'm Carol Looper. I'm a board member and a program committee member of Columbus Metropolitan Club. And I have two questions that are very similar. I'm going to read them both. From Brad Sinnott, what part of Issue 1 increases council pay from its current figure to $80,000? And Richard Aids, why does the anti-campaign say council members will earn $80,000 a year? My understanding is that members currently make less than $60,000.
You guys want to take this first?
Be happy to. So any employer will tell you that they don't just look at a person's salary when they're doing their budgeting. They look at the full cost of that employee. And as taxpayers, we do the exact same thing with our council. We know that our council members are paid a salary. They're also provided with health insurance, pension, and other benefits. And you add all that together, that's $80,000 a year. By adding additional council members, I think as Mr. Beard has noted, 6 times 80 is going to get you a little bit to the full cost, but here's the real cost. Each council office costs $260,000 a year. That's 1 council member and 2 assistants. That doesn't include any of the overhead costs of having a council. That does not include any of the support staff that exist, like Legislative Research Office, communications, the other staff that exist at council. These are real costs that should be taken into account if you're going to vote on an issue like Issue 1.
I would love the opportunity to respond. I agree, $80,000 a year, all inclusive for a part-time job seems a bit ridiculous to me. Unfortunately for us, we can't do anything about that. The current city council recently supported a increase in their own pay. So when this is put on our campaign, it's really just a tactic and an outright lie. And we've seen that from the opposition campaign that is largely supported, by people that, Bryan doesn't even live in Columbus. So we're seeing that from outsiders. What we're hearing from people actually here is they want representation. And the cost is not dictated by us. The cost is dictated by the current city council. And they're the ones that supported their own pay raise. So when that's put on Issue 1, it really needs to go back to the current system.
Great. Next question.
Hello, I'm Carol Mary. I'm also a member of the program committee, and this question is on behalf of Eric Brown. I agree with many of the goals of the Issue 1 proponents, notably the importance of diversity and inclusion. How do we achieve these worthy goals under the current structure of city government?
Let you guys take that.
Well, I think we currently have one of the most diverse city councils that we've had, at least in recent history. You've got a number of African Americans, you've got members of the LGBT community, you've got women. We've got a very diverse city council. It really does reflect the diversity of the city. Now, do we have every single ethnic group that is represented here in Central Ohio? No, we don't. Will that ever become the case? I'm not sure. But I do believe that one of the things that is a real strong aspect of this Columbus City Council is its diversity, and I don't want to see that change.
John, you want to respond?
Sure. I think, we are a growing and diverse city now. We've got to look beyond black and white. We've got all sorts of ethnicities, as they acknowledge, and we've got to give them a fair chance to have their representatives elected and not appointed or selected as the black folk are right now. We are all appointed or selected and run in our first elections as incumbents. And we, as a black community, many of us are saying we deserve the right to select and choose our own rather than just taking who's given to us and then having them run these non-competitive citywide elections that are too expensive to raise a credible challenge to. Right now we are overrepresented with black folk on council. We've got 4 of 7 in an electorate that's about 21% black, I think it is. I think when we get in the black community, James talks about we've got to keep 4 of 7, and we've got to keep that ratio of 57.14%. I think that's ridiculous. What people are trying to do is get good representation. I've worked in neighborhoods for 20 years, and in every neighborhood I've worked in, people have said the same thing. This government does not represent us. They're not listening to us. They're not doing what we want. When they come in, they run over us. So what we want is somebody of any race, creed, or color who will work on our behalf in the neighborhoods to support the existing residents.
All right. Next question.
My name's Tim Sword, and I'm reading on behalf of Rory Krupp. As an area commissioner, I find my position to be worth as much as the proverbial warm bucket of spit. How will City Council improve communication with area commissions?
Start with you guys.
Again, we hear that regularly. I've heard that regularly over 20 years. The area commissions are great. They do a great job. They volunteer their time, and they do it thanklessly. And they get run over time and time again. On the Near East Side right now, we're dealing with a big project moving forward where the area commission opposed a mass demolition, opposed zoning variances on the new construction, and opposed an application for low-income housing tax credits, but all were approved. Everybody knows that area commissions are recommending bodies only. They don't have political power. The commissioners I talked to, and I've had probably 20 commissioners on my board over that 20 years, would love to have political power in the neighborhood. They would love to have an allied council member who can take their interests and reflect them. Right now, we've got a system that burns out community leaders. They're chasing council members who don't know anything about the issues, don't know anything about the people. They're chasing them all over the city, trying to get 4 or 7 people to understand what's going on and then agree to help them. Having one person who does that for them, who's paid to go downtown with their staff, advocate internally within City Hall, would be a good thing for area commissions, would be a good thing for the commissioners. They've got a thankless task now. They need help.
Bryan, you want to respond? Or James?
One of the things that I feel that we did very effectively when I worked for Columbus City Council was interact with our area commissions. One of the things that Councilwoman Tavares would have me do was accept minutes from our area commissions and then give her a report out on some of the things that were pertinent issues related to what was going on with those area commissions. When we needed to go out from City Hall and make sure that we were meeting with those area commissions, we would come equipped with solutions that would help them. A part of what I think can help to improve our area commissions is professional development for area commissioners, as well as improving the structure across the board. It is true that we have some area commissions that work more effectively than others around town. I think some continuity across the board between our area commissions through a professional development program for those commissioners and others who are striving to be commissioners would be good for our citizenry to see us improve the relationship between those commissions and council. Now, on the ground, as an aide, I would probably say I worked a little bit too hard in trying to retrieve all those minutes and juggle all of those things. But I do think that that is a very important aspect of what we can do to improve things moving forward. You got to be aware of what's happening out there on the street.
Next question.
My name is Kermit Whitfield, and I'm asking a question on behalf of Ann Evans. It has been stated that moving to a ward system would be detrimental to Columbus City schools. Can anyone elaborate on why that would be the case?
Have you guys start?
That's an interesting question and something that I haven't heard before. So I kind of like that. We live in a really interesting city with our win-win districts, and one of the things that's not taken into account when these wards are drawn is the boundaries of those win-win districts, as well as the feeder system within our current Columbus City schools. It's very possible that the ward system would divide feeder systems. It's certain that the ward system would divide and combine various win-win districts. I think it would really make it much more challenging for Columbus City Council as a whole to work with the school district as a whole to jointly move the city forward.
Response?
There are lots of lines in the city. I'm on the Near East Side. I'm in the 12th Policing Precinct because that's south of Broad Street. The 7th Policing Precinct is north of Broad Street, all the same Near East Side. The cops don't go shooting their guns across at each other across Broad Street, and we don't have problems with people who live on Long Street because we live on Main Street. I don't understand the question. I hadn't heard it either, but I don't see how moving to council districts changes anything about the school systems, win-win or not.
Got another question approaching the podium.
I'm reading a question on behalf of Harvey Hook. if the real issue is the character of the people we elect to represent us, why does it matter whether they are at large or representative of wards or districts?
John or Whitney?
I think one of the things we're trying to do is say citizens should always be in control of our democracy, okay? We should be able to put people in office and remove them from office. Right now, almost everybody's put in office for us. So until the last election, over the last 30 years, all but 3 people were put in office for us. Then the question is, can you remove them? In a citywide election that costs $250,000 to run a competitive race against an incumbent, nobody can raise that kind of money. So once they're in office, the people cannot remove them. Once they're in office, they can irritate somebody on the southeast side and get their votes on the northwest side. So I think local representation breaks it down to where we've got a manageable political system that we can make an impact on. Right now, as citizens, we've lost control of our government. I think that's reflected in the high level of current scandal we've had. And this is really sadly across Franklin County. Got corruption in the school system, corruption in the city, corruption in the county right now. Certainly, as citizens of Columbus, we can take control of our government, which is the City of Columbus. The charter is our document. It says we the people of the City of Columbus, not we the politicians, not we the elected officials. It says we the people. It's ours to shape as we want, and we believe that shaping it so that we have actual influence and control over our elected officials is very important to our democracy.
Bryan?
John is absolutely right. The charter is the citizens' document, and the current system was put in place by Columbus citizens. A proposal like this was rejected by Columbus citizens twice in the last decade. I hope that it will be rejected again by Columbus citizens next week. But the notion that our government is somehow not controlled by Columbus citizens is frankly ludicrous. The appointment process doesn't change under issue 1. If his concern is the appointment process, that should have been a part of the issue. It's not. Under this proposal, I think that the elections will be no less expensive than they are today. You have districts that are roughly the size of a state house district, and that's certainly not a grassroots campaign as we see every election cycle here in Columbus. And as we see in Austin and Seattle, while recognizing these were their first elections for wards, both cities in their first ward elections set new records for candidate spending and special interest spending in their elections. Record spending. A single district council person in Seattle spent over almost $500,000 trying to get elected. So this notion that moving to wards will magically remove money from politics or make our elections more competitive has been proven wrong time and time again.
Thanks. Another question?
Yes, actually, there are 2 questions that are similar, so I'm going to kind of combine them as we did earlier. The first is from Bill Oberdick. Columbus is prospering, but are certain neighborhoods being left behind? And the other is from Will Petrick. Do you think that there will be more attention to property and violence with council members elected from Linden, the South Side, Franklinton, and the Hilltop?
Let's have you guys start on that. James?
Yes, I believe Columbus has great momentum. There are some neighborhoods where we need to work specifically to start overcoming the obstacles of success. We need some family stability in many of those neighborhoods. And a lot of that is on the onus of the neighbors themselves, our residents, ourselves. We've got to start doing the things that are necessary to start solving our own problems. Not every problem that exists within our neighborhoods is because of Columbus City government. And when you talk about policing in communities and some of the neighborhood problems that we do have, a change in council structure is not necessarily the solution to that problem. We've got work to do on our own, and I believe that we are doing that. There are neighborhoods that need a lot more attention, and that's coming right now. I believe that the current structure is in place to make sure that we are doing that. What I don't want to see is where a neighborhood or ward representative is only concerned with the success and impact in their own specific neighborhood. That's no good for the entire city of Columbus. We've got to make sure that we're spreading resources equitably around the city, and an at-large structure is the best way to do that.
Response, Whitney? John?
Yes. Well, what we're talking about here is for those questions is bringing a diversity of views and experiences and different neighborhoods to the City Council, which currently doesn't exist. There are many different issues that are specific to neighborhoods, and I disagree with James. I don't think the onus is on neighborhoods, because Jonathan's been working in neighborhoods for 20 years, pleading with City Council for help on many different issues, and he's been ignored repeatedly. So there are many citizens in many neighborhoods that are working really hard for their neighborhoods, and we really need to help them, and how we help them is by having a representative that represents them from their neighborhood, who walks in their streets, who is accessible to them, and who they can talk to.
Great. I think we got one last question.
This is a question from Martha Trout. How do you visualize preventing competition and infighting between ward representative council members?
I'd suggest a referee. Sorry, go ahead.
We hear that boogeyman raised all the time, and you look across the country, and they'll pick a selected example or so. But you look across the country, that's the essence of legislation. Is we've got limited resources and competing needs. If we can't find good legislators in Columbus, or the ones that we have now say they can't do the job, so we need to fire them and get people who will do that job. That's the essence of legislation, is developing a shared agenda. And right now we don't have a shared agenda. To Whitney's point about the diversity of neighborhoods, we don't need this one-size-fits-all approach that we have right now from our city government. We need solutions tailored to the neighborhood level. What I needed on Main Street in 2010 isn't what other neighborhoods needed. And so we've got to be able to have a responsiveness in our political system to that. And right now, coming from a neighborhood's perspective, we don't have that. Having council members elected by districts gives us real influence downtown, where we can get that fine-tuning.
Thanks.
John is absolutely right. We do need tailored solutions to our neighborhoods, and that's exactly what the city is doing. That's why you see record capital spending on the Hilltop and Linden this year, over $70 million in a single year being invested. That's why you see Linden as sort of a linchpin of the smart cities application. It will be literally in the driver's seat for the next generation of transportation built right here in the city of Columbus. I think the idea, again, that somehow we are going to avoid the problems that we see at the State House, the problems that we see in Congress, the problems that we see in Cleveland, everywhere where there are scarce resources and people with parochial interests who have no reason to work together to find common goals. I think we are very likely to see that in Columbus, and frankly, we don't see it today because we focus on what we like to call the Columbus way. We disagree, we argue, but then we find consensus. We find ways to move together. It's not worth it to argue for the sake of arguing. It's not worth it to argue just to say that we had a different opinion at the table. I want the right opinion at the table, and I want an effective local government. That's exactly what we have.
Great, thanks. Do we still have time for closing remarks? Okay, 60 seconds for each of you. Do you guys want to go first?
Sure. Well, thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to come and present our stance. We love this city. We believe it's one of the greatest cities on the planet, and it's definitely the greatest city to live in the United States of America. I'm proud of Columbus, Ohio. I want to see us continue the momentum that we have moving forward. Issue 1 stops that in its tracks. 3 things to ask. Why is this happening in August? Why is there no map? And who foots the bill for all of this? If you just think about those 3 things as you go to vote, we're sure that you'll understand why we feel that you have to vote no on issue 1. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks. Final remarks?
Yes. Thank you so much for having us today. We appreciate any opportunity to get out and speak about an issue that we feel is personally and passionately about as this issue. I think what you need to take away from this is to not listen to all of the fear-mongering that's really going on and the misrepresentation of this issue. This issue does one thing. It gives people in Columbus their fundamental right to representation, something that is sorely lacking, but something that issue 1 does. It's the only thing it does. It gives neighborhoods representation on city council, and we've talked to 39,000 people in this city who have said, we need to get this issue on the ballot. So please, when you go out and vote yes, and thank you for being our audience today.
Let's have Mo Wright come back up to close us out.
Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you so much to our speakers today. If you have not made up your mind, I think you have about another week to do that, a little less than a week to do that. So well, thank you for the information today. We know you enjoyed today's forum. We invite you to stick around and continue the conversation over coffee and cookies. Remember, you can always view our forums on Columbus Television, on WOSU, through PBS affiliates throughout the state, via the Ohio channel, and, of course, through the CMC website via YouTube. Let's thank again our speakers, Bryan Clark, James Ragland, Jonathan Beard, Whitney Smith, and our host today, Walker Evans. Thank them again. And, of course, thank you to all of you for being here. We'll see you next week.